Hi everyone. As I mentioned in the course news, this is going to be a little demo of using CSS, more advanced CSS, to lay out your page. And I'm going to have a couple of examples, or at least one more example besides this one. But this is Starbuzz Coffee, which is the exercise that runs all through Headfirst HTML. And this is Starbuzz Coffee from the newer edition of Headfirst HTML that I don't think most of you have. It's Headfirst HTML with CSS rather than XHTML, so it really focuses on HTML5. And um, so what we're looking at is the Starbuzz Coffee, and this is a three-column layout, and it has these various things that kind of float. It has this coupon over on the side, see, and it sort of stays in the same position no matter where the page goes. It has this award thing hanging out up at the top. It's got these three columns. And one nice thing about it is that if you resize the browser, it does pretty well. You can see it has to get about this narrow before stuff starts getting kind of illegible and getting out of place, which means that this would probably work okay on your phone. You know, you could understand this. You could still see it on your phone. Scroll down to the bottom, and there's a footer down here. So, how do they do this? Well, if you look at the CSS, or if you look at the code for the page, if we start off looking at the code for the page, I think I'll just leave that there. So here we have the code for the page, and you start seeing the IDs. There's a header, there's an award, then there are these three divs that are all nested together, and it says table container, table row. And you also may have gotten the impression from doing the readings that, you know, we're not supposed to use tables just for layout. Tables are supposed to be data. They're not supposed to be used just to hold down blocks of content into the right place. And what this is using is a newer CSS property that works in more newer browsers, and it's CSS table display. And I'll show you more about it on when we look at the CSS that goes with this HTML code. There's another div called main, and then down here there's another div called sidebar. There's a class, there's another class, and then here you can see these divs end, and this is using the HTML comment to hide, you know, to identify these divs. And I had mentioned this in some earlier demo that, you know, when you start using CSS and you have all these nested divs, HTML comment is good to let you know where all your divs end. So, you know, up here we had table container, table row. We had this drinks one, but drinks I think ended right here. And then we had sidebar start here, and then sidebar, table row, table container all end down here. So that may start to give you some idea of, maybe it's got something to do with this and this. If we go back, then here's the footer, and then that ends all by itself. So if we take a look at the CSS, here's the CSS. And here you start to see some of the CSS positioning. There's a float to the right for the header image. And then we start seeing some other things, position absolute, position fixed. And in the Niederst book, actually, there's very good description of how all these different positions work. I just wanted to read from Headfirst HTML. the basic four kinds of positions are static, absolute, fixed, and relative. And we don't have any static on here because if you don't specify anything else in your CSS, then it automatically is static. And I'm trying to get back to the place where I was. But if we go back to these ones that are absolute and fixed, absolute positions the element that you want closest to the next closest element. And if you don't put in some measurements, like 30 pixels or 365 pixels, then absolute positioning would by default just put your ID near the next closest element, which is the HTML open or the top of the page. Fixed puts your element in relationship to the browser window. So this one, this coupon, is fixed at 350 pixels from the top of the browser window, and it's got a negative position for the left, and that's what makes it overlap or escape the browser window. If we take a look at it again, you'll see that it actually escapes. It's negative 90 pixels going off the edge of the page where you can't see it anymore. And that fixed positioning that's always 350 pixels from the top is what makes it just stay in the same place no matter how you scroll the screen around. This is that award thing, and you can see it's about 30 pixels from the top, and I don't remember what it was supposed to be, something over from the side, 365 from the side. So that's how the fixed and absolute positioning work. We don't have any relative positioning in this example. Here we have this table row and table cell displays, and that's how the column, this column was built, that it's keeping this text within this column. And if we go back to the CSS, if I open up my CSS markup palette in BB Edit, when I look at layout, I have this, I can choose whatever selector I want it to be. Say I choose my, # drinks, my drinks ID, and I can choose this, have it display as a table cell or have it display as a table row. That's the CSS display property that works in most modern browsers. The other thing, well, I think that's actually, I guess here you can see it's got this header ID that floats to the right, and if we go back to look at the HTML, let's see if I can find that. If we do, it was header, whoops, of course I can't type and talk at the same time. And here's this header image, and if we go back and look at the page, you can see it's this. This text is actually an image, as you can tell because I can sort of pull it, and what it's doing is floating it to the right. So it always stays over there to the right, and again, if we scrunch up the page, it works pretty well until you get the page pretty compressed. So that's a little bit about how this example works. Again, this is in Chapter 11 of the newer Head First HTML. I'm going to scan the bullet points from that uh, newer Head First HTML from the Chapter 11 about CSS for positioning. But I really recommend the neatest book. It's, I think, chapters 14, it's chapters 14, 15, and 16 that really get into advanced CSS and give you a lot of exercises. And, you know, basically the way CSS works overall is that the different elements are, are lay out on the HTML page in relationship to each other. So if you want to, sometimes the best way to do something, if you want you can see here there it's got body background color. So what's happening here is that the body is filling in all of the background color. And then the other elements that sit on top of the body have margins or are smaller so that you can, it's almost like laying down your background color and then arranging the other elements on top and using margins to make to let the body peep through, or you know, to cover up the body. And in all of our textbooks they talk about the box model, and that's the point, is that you figure out the dimensions of your whole box. You know, say it's going to be 800 pixels wide, and then you create and you can fill in the whole background color that's 800 pixels wide. And then you can create these elements that sit on top of the background color and have different backgrounds, like this image, and then the background color just, oops, I'm highlighting the wrong thing. These lines are the background color just peeking out in between the other elements.